Hey, have you ever fallen into a trance? Stay tuned, we're going to talk about it. God bless you this morning. Thank you for joining me on Morning Nuggets. This is your host, Pastor Nate. I'm so glad that you decided to join me this morning. It is my absolute pleasure whenever I can speak with you. Let's talk about trances. Have you ever been in a trance? Have you been around people who have fallen into trances? Now, we know a trance is a half-conscious state characterized by the absence of a response to external stimuli. Have you ever been around somebody and they just go into a daydream? This may have happened to you. They start daydreaming and you call them, hey Nate, hey Nate, hey Nate. And I'm like, oh, did you call me? I was gone in the zone. And friends, many times God is showing you something and speaking to you. Maybe that happened to you when you were a kid. You were in a classroom setting, or you were in the living room with your parents and they were talking to you, or the teacher was teaching and you didn't hear nothing they said. When you're in this mode, you just block everything out. You're not focused on nothing but what you see in the so-called vision that you're seeing. Because many times when you have a trance, when you go into a trance, you see visions. In many cases, God is showing you something. So if your children, if they're doing that, you might want to pay attention that maybe God is showing them something, kind of be mindful of that. In Acts 10:10, Peter went into a trance. Now, we know trances are typically induced by a medium or a witch doing hypnosis, but there's also spiritual trances too, and that's found in Acts 10:10. Peter went on a housetop one day at the 6th hour to pray, and they were in the house preparing him a meal. Peter was so hungry that he fell into a trance, and he started to see a vision. He saw all these animals, 4-footed beasts, the Bible says, the fowl of the air, and a voice spoke to him and said, Peter, rise, kill, and eat. And Peter like, no, that's unclean. And that voice came to him 3 times, and that was, Jesus talking to him, and he was basically saying, don't call what I made pure, don't call unclean. I talked about this before, but my point was, Peter went into a trance, and that's what he saw. He saw a vision. And many times, some of you might be having a vision. Have you ever been in a church service, where the preacher was preaching, and all of a sudden he or she stopped, and you think they're looking at you? Well, they stopped. It might seem like they're looking at you, but their eyes naturally might be fixed on you, but they're seeing in the spirit. Maybe they're looking that direction because God is showing them something about you. I'm sure you've experienced that, and you might be the one who does that. And God is showing them something about you, and it kind of freaks you out if you don't understand what's going on, because they're in this state where they're just stuck and they're paused and they're just looking, and you're like, why are they looking my way? Don't freak out, friend. They might be in a trance. There might be seeing a vision. God is downloading information to give to you probably. So just want to explain that in case that happens to you. Back in the day, there was this evangelist. Her name was Maria Woodworth. I talked about this before in a previous video, when that wave of glory was going on and these healing evangelists was going on in the early 1900s, mid 1900s. Well, this lady, she would go all around the world and pitch her tent and have healing revivals, and people from all over came because she prayed for the sick and they recovered. Well, to make a long story short, during this revival, people in her meetings would go into a trance and they started seeing visions. You remember I talked about that just a second ago in church. Can you imagine her preaching and teaching and praying, all of a sudden she stops, or a few people around her just stop and they just pause like this here looking? God is showing them something. In fact, in one of her meetings, a man possibly went into a trance, and he prophesied that there was going to be an earthquake in San Francisco. That's the vision that he saw. And during that meeting, Mary Eder and that man and her team, they received a lot of backlash from that. That man actually was put into a mental institution, and it just caused some issues in that city wherever they were. But needless to say, an earthquake did take place in San Francisco, because that's what he saw when he went into a trance. So friends, I thought I would bring this to you because maybe God does use people in trances or in visions, if you will, because when you go in a trance, I'm sure you're seeing something. You're some people call it daydreaming, where you just stop and you just look and start daydreaming. Maybe God is showing you something. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the topic. If you've experienced that or know someone who has, I appreciate you supporting the channel. Do not forget to subscribe. I will be bringing more of these videos. If you want a particular topic discussed, please leave me a comment, or you can send me an email. My email will be in the description. Thank you again. In the meantime, in between time, be at peace and not in pieces. Till next time, my friend.